What's up you guys, Kongrongzong here. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is out. So this is going to be a pretty ambitious, or shall I say, comprehensive video in which I'm going to try and cover most of the key features of this new Call of Duty game. It's a pretty big game, no doubt, that comes with a pretty hefty price tag at that, especially when you consider not only the base price, but probably the season passes over time. So let's jump straight into it. I would like to share with you about the campaign first, and for good reason. I know, you guys want to hear about the multiplayer aspect, right? Because that's what COD is all about. I'm going to get to that. I just gotta talk about this first because the campaign was so damn amazing. Really, this Modern Warfare campaign was one of the best first-person shooter campaigns I've ever played. Period. Whether or not it will be worth your money to buy this game is one question, but whether or not it will be worth your time to experience the campaign, hell yes. It was short, but also sweet, lasting about 5 to 6 hours or so for one playthrough. There is very little else that you could be spending 5 to 6 hours on, and I'm saying that confidently from how much I enjoyed the campaign, that could be worth spending on more than this. Everything about the campaign was amazing. For one, there was never a dull moment. Every part of the campaign was full on action, whether it be blazing gunfights, blasting your ears full of gunshots and explosions, or intense stealth missions that would leave your heart in your mouth when clearing every room of a house. There was never a boring moment in the entire campaign, and I actually played the entire thing in one solid playthrough. As each mission ended, I was on the edge of my seat ready to start the next one, and it never disappointed me. In line with this are of course the sound effects of Modern Warfare, which naturally carry over into the multiplayer aspect of the game. The sound effects in this game are top notch. Top fucking notch. The visuals of the game, while impressive, were nothing much that we hadn't seen before. It was the sound. The bullets leaving the gun, ricocheting over surfaces, NPCs desperately shouting over comms, explosions to your right and left, the deafening whirring of helicopter blades, the ear-splitting boom of the planes as they flew past. My god, it was as though I was in a movie theater. Hell, it was as though I was right there, in the game itself. The sound added a metric shit ton to the immersion, and I cannot give higher praise for this.
Shut up.
When playing the campaign, I would implore you, if you don't use them, to use a set of headphones or earphones. It will enhance your experience tenfold. But fancy visuals and sound effects aside, because we all know they enhance a game but not make it, what was it that really made this Modern Warfare campaign stand out? And I know many of you will be able to appreciate this. It was the fact that the developers were not afraid to explore controversial topics. For those of you that have already played the game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It wasn't necessarily anything super out of the ordinary. It does explore topics that we are somewhat desensitized to already from the constant barrage of news we get from third world nations at war. Topics such as inhumane torture, difficult hostage situations, suicide bombers, child violence, basically the real ugly side of war. But in this game, in Modern Warfare, the gloves are off. You get to experience all of it, firsthand, right there on your screen. At pivotal moments, choices have to be made. Choices that you cannot go back on. Whether to kill a child for the greater good, to stand by and watch as hostages die in front of your eyes, to see innocent civilians die in front of you, to be treated as simple collateral damage. And it's you, right there, pulling the trigger, running over their corpses, or moving on without a tear being shed for these people. This is what is happening, on the ground, and you get to experience it firsthand in Modern Warfare. Everything comes together in an excellent package. The sound effects, the visuals, the little details of soldiers shouting for backup, of civilians crying as they hug their loved ones. It was chaotic. It was gripping. It was intense. It was immersive. And it was realistic. As you play through the campaign, you begin to realize these are scenes that the news cannot capture, that only can be captured when you experience it firsthand. And Modern Warfare gives us just a taste of what our soldiers on the ground go through. There are no true good guys or bad guys in war. Only the foot soldiers on one end and the politicians on the other, all fighting for their own agendas. And the cycle never ends. Like I said previously, is the campaign worth your time to experience? Yes, 1,000 times yes. I like to think that I've played quite a lot of games in my life, and this one will definitely be one of the most memorable ones. Would it be worth the cost of the game just to experience the campaign? Well, that would really depend on you. There are various tiers of difficulty, even a realism mode where all HUDs are disabled, so there is some replayability there, but not too much. So if you're in it just for the campaign, I would encourage you to wait for a sale. Call of Duty prices do drop drastically within the first few months. With that said, let's go on to what Modern Warfare is really about, the PvP multiplayer aspect. Straight off, I want to share with you that I don't think the multiplayer aspect is going to be what most of you guys would expect from a typical FPS game. There is going to be a steep learning curve, and I suspect that for most people, it's either going to be your cup of tea or it isn't. Allow me to share with you about the maps first. At launch, Modern Warfare has only about a handful of maps, which rotate around the different game modes. There isn't anything too original about their concepts in terms of the FPS genre. Basically variations of capture the point type matches, where you stand on a point to capture it and earn points periodically based on how many of them your team possesses, and death matches, where whoever scores the most points or is the last man standing wins. So fundamentally, there isn't anything different about the type of maps you will encounter. What you will face though, is that these maps are now, how shall I say, much more complex, with many layers of depth added onto them. What do I mean by this? Well, FPS maps usually have a 3-lane kind of concept to them, whereby there are 3 defined lanes to attack an objective. This is clearest in other genres like MOBAs, games like Dota 2 or League of Legends, where the map is divided near identically for either side's half, with 3 attacking or defending lanes. This can also be seen in many classic Counter-Strike maps, such as DDoS, where there is a left turn that leads to one bomb site, a right turn that leads to the other side, and an underground tunnel. Or the Aztec, where there is a giant doorway, a bridge, and a canal. Modern Warfare's maps follow basically the same concept of this. However, the big difference is that many layers have been added to them in terms of, say, second or third floors of buildings, multiple blocks of cover, intermediate levels, doorways that you can open or close, ledges that you can jump onto, numerous corners that you can hide behind, and so on. While familiarity of the maps would increase over time, it does still introduce multiple elements to what used to be a simple run and gun type of playstyle. Much more strategic thought will have to be put into your movements, where now it's almost a certain guarantee that you would die within a few seconds if you're not constantly, and I placed great emphasis on this, constantly cognizant of your surroundings. A run and gun approach no longer works that well in this Call of Duty game. You have to actively check corners, you have to ADS down most pathways, you have to pause and listen for enemy footsteps, you have to actively plan your route within fractions of a second so as to not overexpose yourself. Added onto this is the fact that time to kill in this game, TTK, is extremely fast. Extremely fast. Gunfights don't last more than a second, with half a second probably being the average. In Modern Warfare, we are all basically sheets of paper running around with giant boomsticks. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but make no mistake, it definitely changes up the playstyle quite a bit. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Crap, that sounds like it's going to be a haven for campers. And that's somewhat true. It's something that I've experienced, and it's something that I believe is worth pointing out. Very often I seem to produce better results when I just stayed out and held out in a small area, rather than running around trying to pick people off. I wasn't necessarily camping and not moving from, say, one windowsill. It was more of like pacing back and forth between the second and first floor of the same house, picking people off that ran past from the second, or killing those that opened the doors below. Coupled with this, of course, is the kill streak concept, where the more kills you racked up in one life, the better an advantage you will have over the opponent, whether it be summoning a UAV or an attack chopper. So rather than killing, it seemed to be more rewarding to not die instead. Again, this isn't to say that the gameplay is going to revolve around camping. The maps are well designed enough to always have alternative flanking avenues for any piece of concealed or high ground. Many objective-based maps, like the capture point ones, also force you and your teammates out of cover in order to cap a point. But what it does do is promote a much more cautionary style of gameplay. The all-out run and gun is now dead. Literally, run at your own risk in this game, as not only does it give a huge advantage to your enemy from the heavy footfalls of your steps, it also gives a huge disadvantage to your ability to quickly aim down your sights. In this Modern Warfare, by and large, whoever ADSs first wins first. The time to kill is that fast. And so I return to the original point, the most important point that I want you to be aware of. If there's anything that you take away from this video, let it be this. The learning curve of the multiplayer aspect of Modern Warfare is going to be a little steep, and there's going to be quite a grind ahead of you. You're going to die and die and die and die again and again and again and again for quite a while. And this can get very frustrating. It's already happened to me within the first several hours of the game, and while I do every now and then manage to get to the top of the scoreboard, it inevitably happens every so often as I make multiple mistakes in a row. As I mentioned before, familiarity of the maps aside, I felt like this was due more to a very ingrained FPS playstyle that most of us have developed from other popular FPS games. A run and gun playstyle that we keep defaulting to that just won't really work here. Modern Warfare requires a unique blend of both, running when you should, holding your position when you should, while being acutely aware of your surroundings. And this may or may not be your cup of tea, especially if you're someone that just wants to have a nice relaxing evening running around shooting things, instead of strategically thinking of your movements while simultaneously paying attention to every visual and auditory detail on your screen. But that's of course not the whole story. Coupled with this steep learning curve is also the part about guns, whereby you not only have your own personal rank, as is typical of most Battlefield or Call of Duty games, but each gun must now also be leveled individually on its own. For example, in order to unlock the actual guns, like this sniper rifle here, I need my own personal rank to be 37. But in order to unlock any of the attachments needed for that specific gun, I need to use that specific gun in combat until I level it up sufficiently for the attachment that I want. And these attachments are pretty dang important. Some of them would even make or break the gun you are using or the playstyle that you want to employ. Would you be able to use them without the ideal attachments? Sure, but would another player that had all the attachments have an inherent advantage over you? Most probably. And so this adds yet another layer of grind to the initial learning curve. At the beginning, you're going to have to go through a sort of trial by fire, but in this case, deaths, in order to level the gun that you like the most. And considering how many different guns and attachments there are, it's going to be quite a long grind ahead for most players. Again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. A good fulfilling grind with suitable rewards is a great thing in any game. But I just want you to be aware of the grind that you are getting into. Modern Warfare is a game whereby you will need to invest a substantial amount of time and effort in order to get good at it. It's much more of an elite shooter in terms of its gameplay, incorporating as many realistic elements as possible while trying to keep the gameplay fair and exciting. Over time, I suspect that many players will actually prefer to go back to their usual shooters instead of Modern Warfare, and the game will retain a small but die-hard player base, instead of appealing to the mass market. If I had to give a rating, I would give Modern Warfare a solid 8 out of 10. Performance-wise too, it ran extremely well. No FPS drops, 1 or 2 crashes at launch, and a really smooth gameplay experience overall. If you're a hardcore FPS player that isn't afraid of a steep learning curve, Modern Warfare will definitely be an amazing game for you. As much as I dislike its parent company, as we all do, Activision, I believe the price in this case is worth the entire package, from the single player campaign to the endless amounts of PvP you can get in the multiplayer modes. But if you would like to wait out buying Modern Warfare until a sale, I think that's a good choice too, because Call of Duty games always go on sale really quickly, within a few months. Just be aware that the further you lag behind on the grind, both in terms of the new playstyle you have to adapt to and the actual guns and levels, the larger the gap will be between the experienced players and you, which may result very well in an even more frustrating experience down the road. Nevertheless, still a really solid FPS game. A Call of Duty game that deserves to be remembered for breaking new ground.